Welcome back. This is the first video on AQA A-level French. We're looking at topic 1, which is the changing nature of family, or la famille en voie de changement. These videos are to assist your classwork and your revision. I would also like some feedback on what people like, what people don't like, and what people want to see more of. The topics covered in this section are Grandparent, parents et enfants, soucis et problèmes, monoparentalité, homoparentalité, famille recomposée, et la vie de couple, nouvelle tendance. So now we're going to move on to the warm-up for this section. The task is to describe the photo on the left in French, and in your description you should include some opinions, you should include 3 time frames, and you should include some negatives, and not just ne pas, you should try and use ne jamais, ne rien, and all the others. Once you've done that, there are some questions below, and you can also pause the video to describe the photo. The questions are: quel rôle jouent les grands-parents dans les familles modernes? So what role do grandparents play in modern families? And then, les parents devraient-ils impliquer leurs enfants dans les discussions importantes comme les finances? Pourquoi pas? So, should parents involve their children in important discussions like those about finances? Why or why not? So give those a try, give yourself an answer, and then on the next slide we'll be going through some model answers for the 2 questions. But please pause the video to do that. So now I'm going to go through a model answer. Here are some responses that you could give. You may also have your own answers, that's fine. I'm going to read these out in French, and of course, I'm not native French, so my accent will probably sound quite English, but that's fine. It would also be good if you guys could read along too, just because speaking out loud in French is good for improving your oral ability. So, les grands-parents jouent un rôle essentiel dans les familles modernes, surtout quand les 2 parents travaillent à plein temps. Ils peuvent fournir un soutien inestimable, non seulement en gardant les petits-enfants, mais aussi en transmettant des valeurs traditionnelles. Cependant, certains disent qu'ils risquent d'interférer dans l'éducation, surtout s'ils ont des opinions très différentes des parents. Cela dit, il est indéniable que leur présence apporte de la stabilité, notamment dans les familles monoparentales, où leur aide est souvent indispensable. Moving on to the next question, here are some responses, and of course you may have your own too. À mon avis, les parents ne devraient pas impliquer leurs enfants dans toutes les discussions importantes comme les finances. Bien que certains pensent que cela les responsabilise, je crois que cela pourrait leur causer inutilement du stress, surtout s'ils sont jeunes. Finally, toutefois, il serait utile d'en parler avec eux progressivement afin de les préparer à gérer l'argent plus tard dans la vie. Si les parents trouvent un bon équilibre, les enfants pourraient apprendre des compétences essentielles sans être accablés par des soucis d'adulte. We're now going to have a look at some specific topics. So underneath grandparent, parents et enfants, soucis et problèmes, here are some things that you can consider when thinking about the topic. But a tip is for languages, especially French, you can apply your knowledge of the UK to France. So, for example, the role of grandparents in the UK and France is going to be quite similar. So if you're ever unsure, you can just use your knowledge of the UK, but give some French examples just to make it sound more realistic. But you'll probably get away with using your knowledge, your general knowledge, to help answer these questions. So in France, the role of grandparents is sometimes essential. This is because many parents who are working full days need grandparents to help and deal with the cost of childcare. So grandparents can do this for free. Grandparents can pick up children from school or supervise them. And then in terms of parental styles, this can vary. So older parents, the grandparents may have a traditional style, but younger ones may have a more relaxed, modern style of parenting. And this can cause arguments or differences in opinion. As grandparents age, it's important for the families to look after them. So they could either look after them in the home, or they could opt for a care home, or we could say un établissement d'hébergement pour personnes âgées dépendantes, which is essentially a long-term care facility. However, this can be difficult for families as there's lots of emotional and financial strain. These facilities tend to be quite expensive. Finally, work-life balance. Again, it's important to balance them in France, just like the UK, because although in France they have a shorter working week compared to many other countries, there's still the issues of commuting and professional demands, which can leave parents stretched thin. Government policies in France can sometimes allow employees, to take care of an ill family member to ease pressures. Additionally, there are some subsidies to help families cover childcare costs. Finally, in terms of grandparents getting assistance, grandparents can and elderly people can also get benefits. So des allocations. But again, specifically, this is similar to the UK as we do provide elderly benefits in the UK, and this is the same in France. Okay, so in the description, I've put an article. I put the link to an article, a BBC article, which is a French article which talks about grandparents, and the title is Des grands-parents qui ne veulent pas être exploités. And then essentially, there's a quote here which says that occasionally looking after your grandparents isn't the same thing as doing it all the time. So this article is a very good article. I picked it because it really shows the problems and the issues that can arise when you've got grandparents looking after children. So please give the video a pause and read the article. After, I'll have some questions and I'll go over the article in more detail as it links to the topic. If you don't want to read the article, that's fine. The next slide will still make sense. The article talks about grandparents who look after their grandchildren and the social pressures that they feel to fulfill this role, which can be sometimes intensive. So there's Cayetana, who's a grandmother in Spain, and she explains that she's had to set some boundaries for her children so she doesn't become the main person who's looking after the children, as this can, for her, can feel like a full-time job. And she wants to still be ready to help them occasionally, but just she doesn't want to be the main provider of the care. She wants to also benefit from her retirement and live an active and independent life without being restrained by looking after the grandparents. So this is something that can really affect grandparents in France or around the French-speaking world, because if there are now that people are working a lot more longer hours, grandparents are needed a lot more, and they may be forced or exploited in a way if they're looking after their grandchildren. The text highlights the negative effects for grandparents who often feel constrained when they look after their grandchildren, and this can be stressful, it can give them anxiety, and also physical and mental health problems. Lots of grandparents can find themselves in this role because of the long work hours and economic difficulties, which can also be harder in countries where there are lots of intergenerational attachments and links, because if there are more links between the generations, it would be more expected for the grandparents to fulfill the role of looking after the children. The experts in this article underline the importance of putting limits to avoid the exploited grandparent syndrome. Um, so this is just to ensure that the grandparents and the children can all live a happy and healthy life without the grandparents being exploited and not being independent. They also talk about having a good communication between parents and the grandparents, just to ensure that everyone knows what they're doing and to avoid any difficult issues. And finally, with this, there are some quotes from the article, and it shows just what different topics were in the article. So, j'ai été très clair à ce sujet. J'ai 4 enfants, et si vous le faites avec l'un d'entre eux, vous devez le faire avec tous. So, this is the grandmother setting clear boundaries with her children, because she knows that if she helps one child, she'll have to help all of the others, and that would be too much for her. And then, si un jour ils ne peuvent pas et qu'ils ont besoin que j'aille chercher l'enfant à l'école, c'est bien. Mais rester avec lui toute la journée, ce n'est vraiment pas bien parce que j'ai ma propre vie. So Cayetana is explaining the difference between occasional help and becoming the primary caregiver. Je fais de la musculation le matin dans le parc du Retiro et l'après-midi, je reste à la maison à faire des choses où je retrouve des amis pour aller au théâtre ou me promener. So this is just Cayetana explaining that she has her own life and how she spends her time during retirement, and it's not just looking after her grandchildren and helping her children. Le syndrome du grand-parent exploité est cette obligation morale que les grands-parents ressentent pour s'occuper de leurs petits-enfants. So essentially, this is just discussing the pressure on grandparents. Finally, il est important que vous indiquiez vos limites dès le départ et que vous les précisez. Essentially saying that you should be clear from the start and communicate your limits just so everybody is happy in the future and there are no issues. Next is a translation. I'm going to let you pause the video so you can have a look at these and you can translate it in your head. As it's French to English, the grammar won't be as important. When it's English to French, it might be better to either write it out or also consider the endings of verbs and the agreements, but as it's English to French, it's fine. The answers or some suggested answers will be in the comments in the description, but there's no right answer for this. It's just giving it a go to see how you translate this from French to English. So you can pause the video and have a go. I'll see you on the next slide. So here we have a translation from English to French. Again, with this one, if you're going to translate it in your head, think about the verb endings, the agreements, and the tenses just to make sure everything's correct. Again, there'll be some suggested answers in the description of this video. And of course, all the translations are linked to the topics we've been discussing. The next topic we're going to look at is monoparentalité, homoparentalité, et famille recomposée. So for this, like I mentioned before, you can sometimes apply your knowledge of the UK to France, but there'll be some specific examples where you need to use just French or French-speaking countries as your case study. You can't generalize, but we'll be going over the definitions and the concepts of this subtopic, the historical context, cultural perspectives, challenges and issues, and then legal framework. So in modern society in France, family structures have significantly diversified. So we've got monoparentalité, which is a single parent family. We have homoparentalité, or la homoparentalité, which is same-sex parent families. And then we have les familles recomposées, which is blended families. And that's essentially families where you've got a step parent, step siblings. Each of these have unique characteristics and unique challenges. So, like I mentioned before, single parent families or monoparentalité, this consists of one parent raising their child alone. This is often due to separation, divorce, or bereavement. These families have become a lot more common in recent decades due to shifting societal norms around marriage and family life. Same-sex parenting, or la homoparentalité, involves two parents of the same gender raising a child. Legal and social recognition for these families varies globally. So countries such as France and Canada have progressive laws that support same-sex parents. However, other nations often have a lot more stigma attached to la homoparentalité, and there are restrictions on adoption, for example, and parental rights. Finally, les familles recomposées, or blended families. This is when there's a divorce or a death. Some parents can remarry or cohabit, introducing step parents and step siblings into the family dynamic. These relationships require adjustments from all family members as they navigate new roles and bonds. Over time, societal attitudes have evolved with increasing acceptance of single parent and same-sex families, though challenges remain. For instance, where single parent families are generally accepted, they can often face economic and emotional pressures due to the responsibilities of raising children alone. Same-sex parents, despite many legal protections, can still face social stigma and discrimination. And then blended families face own complexities such as conflicts of loyalty, identity issues for the children, and the need for adaptation as new familial roles are established. Finally, cultural perspectives on these different types of families vary widely. So in France, the legal system has increasingly supported diverse family structures and has recently legalized adoption and assisted reproductive technology for same-sex couples. However, this isn't the case all around the world, but France is relatively progressive. And then there are laws to protect single parent families too. And this is just to show again that France is a lot more progressive compared to other French speaking countries in Africa, for example. And I'll give you some examples of that later. Here are some statistics on the subtopics in France, but before I go over these, I'm just going to talk about non-French francophone countries in relation to la homoparentalité. So in countries such as Senegal, Morocco, Tunisia, Togo, some African countries, there isn't an acceptance of LGBT marriage or LGBT rights. So you could talk about this when you're contrasting France to other countries in a speaking exam. And you could also use the subjunctive to help you with this. So we know that bien que means although, and we use the subjunctive with that. So you could say, bien qu'il y ait une acceptation des droits pour les personnes LGBT en France, ce n'est pas le cas en Afrique. Par exemple, so for example, au Sénégal, on ne peut pas se marier si on est homosexuel. If you say something like that, it will help your marks to improve. But going over the statistics, in 2022, marriages between same people of the same sex were around 3% of celebrated unions in France. In 2021, about a quarter of families in France were single parent families, with a majority of them being led with a majority of these families being led by mothers. In terms of blended families, around 9% of French families are blended, and this is often after divorce or separation. Here are some key dates in relation to the topics we've been going over. So, 2013, we have marriage for all, or le mariage pour tous. This law was also known as la loi Taubira and legalized same-sex marriage and allowed same-sex couples to adopt children. This landmark law significantly advanced the rights of same-sex parents in France, giving them the same legal rights to marriage and adoption as heterosexual couples. Before this, the option was just to have un pax, which is essentially a civil union. So that's PACS. In 2021, the bioethics law, or la loi de bioéthique, was passed. This law expanded access to assisted reproductive technology, which is la procréation médicalement assistée, or la PMA. This was given to all women, including single women and lesbian couples, allowing same-sex females to conceive children with medical assistance. And this was another major step forward for lesbian couples wishing to become parents in France, and essentially increasing la homoparentalité in France. Moving on, we have a debate about the topic of traditional families. So the debate is traditional families are no longer necessary. Again, you can pause the video and think about this, give some ideas for and against. On the screen, I have given some examples of points for traditional families and points against traditional families. If you want to write this out, or if you want to just speak and pretend that it was a question given to you, that's fine. So just give the video a pause and have a look at some potential answers. In the next section, we're going to have a look at la vie de couple, nouvelle tendance. So what are the new tendencies, what are the new trends for life as a couple? So in France, we are seeing more cohabitation sans mariage. A growing number of couples choose to live together without getting married, which reflects changing attitudes towards formal unions. We see an increase in le partage des tâches domestiques. So couples are increasingly adopting a more equitable distribution of household chores, with the younger partners emphasizing shared responsibilities. Again, we have union libre, which is essentially living together without any formal commitment, and it's becoming more socially accepted amongst younger people. However, we're also seeing an increased rate of divorce. So while marriage remains popular, divorce rates have increased, and this is leading to a reevaluation of romantic relationships and their longevity. Finally, we are seeing maternité tardive. Women are increasingly delaying motherhood, choosing to focus on their careers or personal development before starting a family. In the description of the video, I have put a link to lots of statistics relating to the things we've just gone over. So, la homoparentalité, la monoparentalité, les familles recomposées et la vie de couple nouvelle tendance. That will all be in the description of this video. Here is a quick exercise. Give the video a pause and find the errors in these sentences. The next slide will have the correct version of the sentences. So we can see the corrections here. The first one, the error was with the verb ending on partage. The next one, the error was the last part, the agreement. So it's not sans être marié, it's sans être marié, with that being passive, so being married. And the last one, the error is with the agreement on essentiel. There should be an L and an E because it's agreeing with la communication. The last slide, we have a translation. There are 5 more sentences, so give this video a pause and try and translate these again. There's no correct answer, but as it's from English to French, think about your grammar, think about your tenses, think about your agreements, and there'll be some suggested answers in the description box. Thank you for watching this video. Like and comment for any future video suggestions, things that you're looking for with these videos, and just a reminder that this is to assist your revision and your learning. It's not a substitute for your actual textbooks, your actual learning. It's just another resource to help you and give you another idea if you've got an exam coming up soon and you want to revise or go over topics.